Hasselbeck. He co-founded the only English-speaking Unity Church in Puerto Rico. He served as minister of pastoral care at Unity Church of Overland Park in Kansas. And he has been Dean of Spiritual Education and Enrichment at Unity School of Christianity. Reverend Paul has written Point of Power and edited and updated Unity textbooks Metaphysics 1 and Metaphysics 2. He is also co-author of Get Over It and Get Over These Too. He wrote Use the Truth You Know and Unity's Principles and Premises, which were released during the last Unity Convention in June. Reverend Paul is currently working on its companion book, Unity's Laws and Rules. His talk today will focus on messages from Use the Truth You Know. We are delighted to welcome to Unity of London, minister, educator, speaker, the inspiring Reverend Dr. Paul.
I always, when I hear that, I want to go, did I really do all that? Where was I? So let me share my screen with you. Here we go. Praying the technology works. There we go. Is that good for everybody? I'm hoping it is. Yes, thank you very much. So thank you for inviting me. It's exciting to be here with you. And I was giving a wonderful assignment that I got to be creative about, which was the topic for all of Unity is well-being this month. And then I was asked to do something with the latest book, Use the Truth You Know, Unity's Principles and Premises, and also to throw in a little bit from the Get Over It book. So I did all of that. And so first of all, I want you to relax. There's no test. And please feel free to use your cell phone to take pictures. My only hope is you'll understand what I'm saying. There's no requirement to believe. And you can get my slides by going to by sending an email to alberthasselbeck@gmail.com. alberthasselbeck@gmail.com. And I will also be sending them along both the PowerPoint and the PDF to the folks in charge there. And so when we're talking about well-being, the topic of this conversation and the affirmation, my heart knows well-being no matter the circumstances. And when I think about that, I think of the innate intelligence of our bodies. My body knows how to heal itself. I don't have to direct it. And it's also important to think of well-being in terms of our threefold nature: spirit, soul, and body. Of course, our spiritual nature is always in a state of wholeness. And so well-being, we could say, is its natural state. And our soul, which we could consider to be our personalities, and our bodies, sometimes we have to work on. So let's get to it. So let's start with this affirmation. I am master of my well-being. So say that along with me. I am master of my well-being. And so here's the roadmap. We're going to look at premises, principles, laws, and rules a little bit. We're going to talk about key premises. We're going to talk about key principles related to well-being, key laws, and then so what, or what's popularly known as what's in it for me. So a premise is like a big idea or a belief that's assumed to be true, but generally cannot be proven. While a principle is a universal fact or constant, or I gotta get these pictures out of the way. Just a second. Oh, back up. Well, I am really messing up my slide today. Here we go. I'm going to push this over here. Our pictures were in the way. A principle is a universal fact, a constant or quality. You could call it a spiritual fact. A law describes how something works. In the case of a spiritual law, we're talking about how mind works. And a rule informs us on how to use law. We're not going to be talking much more or anything else about rules. And so the three premises for your well-being, for my well-being, revolve around God, you, me, us, and the fact that Charles talked about that we use God. Yes, I did put that right. We use God. According to Charles, God did not use us. And so if that's already making your head explode, again, just take a deep breath. I'm just asking you to understand. So let's look at the three premises. God. So I always start with this in most of my talks so that you are on the same page as I am on what God is. And of course, for me, God is not a being with parts like man, as Myrtle Fillmore says. And so here's a quote from Charles Fillmore. By the term mind, we mean God, the universal principle which includes all principles. The universal principle which includes all principles. What I like about this quote, it includes three synonyms for God: mind, God, and universal principle. And then Myrtle, I don't like to leave her out at all. I always want to include her, said, God is it, neither male nor female, but principle. So as we might expect, Myrtle and Charles were on the same page that God is principle. And then what about you, me, us? Well, here's one of my favorite quotes from Charles. Ego, the I. The ego is man, and by reason of his divinity, he makes and remakes as he wills. In this lie his greatest strength and his greatest weakness. So this is a masterful quote that talks to our divinity as well as our humanity. And so our humanity is an aspect of ourselves, as is our divinity. And notice it doesn't say, and by reason of, as a spark of the divine, or a drop of the divine, or a wave in the ocean. Charles just says divinity. And that's what I believe. Since we say the divine is everywhere totally present, then at the point of view and the point of me is the totality of the divine. And then here's a little translation I've done. The ego is you and I, and by reason of our divinity, we make and remake as we will. And I bet you've noticed that you, over your lifetime, if you look back, you are making and remaking yourselves. And because we have this personality, and because we are divine, we can use our divinity to create great strengths and also our greatest weakness. And I want to remind you, you do not get a great life by empowering your weakest points. So this is what spiritual growth is all about. It's about finding those weakest parts and transforming them. And then in that same quote, Charles goes on to say, through the door of its consciousness must pass all the treasures of God. Again, not a drop, not a little bit, but the totality, all the treasures of God. And so an update, through the door of our consciousness must pass all the principles that God is. Must pass all the principles that God is. They are there, always present for us to use. And then, of course, that brings us in a good position to we use God. So in Get Over It These, we looked at the quote, what we often hear in our churches, God will provide. And in 2009, Bill Holton and I changed that to, I provide from my God nature. I provide from my God nature. But I like to say this, I provide using principle according to law in 2020. I provide, you provide. And so then to get to this idea that we use God, this was a quote I found in searching things for what was missing in prayer. And so I found this quote, it's unpublished. It says, God only does what man says he shall do. God is our servant. Did you ever think of that? That this wonderful Spirit of God, out of which everything is made, is here at all times. It is always present with us, and we are using that God. Now, when I first read that, I kind of ducked, thinking I might be struck by lightning. Because back then, even while I was dean, I still had this residual idea that God uses us. In fact, we have songs about it. Use me, oh God. But That's not the way it is. And so here's a translation of that. Principle only does what we say it shall do. Principle is our servant. Did you ever think of that? That this wonderful principle out of which everything is made is here at all times, is always present, and we are using principle. In fact, friends, you cannot not use principle. We are always using principle, whether we're producing something good, bad, or ugly. Principle doesn't tell us how to use it. And then here's another quote from an unpublished workers' talk. Maybe you didn't know this, but in the early days, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore would have a weekly lesson to the employees where they would all gather together. So this is what they wrote then, or what he said. If you can conceive that all that mine is right at hand for your use, all ideas in the divine mind can be grasped and used by you. Let me read that again, and let me get the emphasis right. If you can conceive that all that mind is right here at hand for your use, all ideas in divine mind can be grasped and used by you. Translate it. If you can conceive that all principle is at hand for your use, all principles that principle is can be grasped and used by you. And then here's another great quote, again from the archives. There is but one power. We use it as we will. If we send it out by our thought and word in hate, it destroys. But if we send it out in love, it builds. There are not two powers, but two ways of using power. As you remember, we say there's only one power and one presence. And we can see that traditionally, that there's a God that has power over us, when in fact, God is power. That power is a principle at the point of each of us, and we get to choose how we use it. And then when we look at the key principles associated with well-being, here's the ones that I focus on, and I use these when I pray with others. So if the goal is well-being, then we need to use the principle of health, which is what we use to manifest soundness and, of course, well-being. There's the principle of life. We use it to energize, vitalize, grow, and expand. Wholeness. It's our ability to express completeness, entirety, and totality. Substance, basis of form and shape. That's one that frequently gets left out. After all, your body is a physical form. And if it has a physical form, in fact, it does have a physical form, there must be a principle behind that. And that principle is the principle of substance. And then, of course, intelligence, knowingness. And I think that as a combination of understanding and wisdom, it's a combo job. So we want to be actively using those to keep ourselves in a state of well-being, and then especially so when we find that parts of our body or even our consciousness is not working quite the way we want them to. And so other powers involved are the 12 powers. I'm not going to go into them. This is an image from my book I co-wrote with Cher Holton, which is called Power Up. And so you can look into those at another class or something like that, but each of those powers could be associated with an illness. For example, if somebody has colon cancer, the colon is involved with elimination. So that's a power we want to claim and assert and affirm is operating optimally. And then we need to look at spiritual law and laws of so we talk about them as spiritual law, and there really are things that are operating in this relative realm. And so they're really laws of mind or consciousness and really only apply to mind, just as there are laws of gravity and laws of electricity and laws of mathematics. Those only play and operate in their specific realm. And so a law describes how our minds or consciousness work, and law works with principles. In fact, In the revealing word, we find God as law is principle in action. So we use law to activate principle. And so one of them is the law of mind action. And for my Get Over It book, we put in there thoughts held in mind produced after their kind. And then in 2008, we translated that to thoughts and feelings held in consciousness create in consciousness. We did that because in most of the unity movement, people think of thoughts held in mind produced after their kind is strictly in the outer realm, or they focus on the outer realm, when really this law of mind works primarily in consciousness. In 2020, I would say thoughts and feelings held in mind produce more thoughts and feelings of the same kind in mind. So the way in which we use the law of mind action is important in well-being. And so we have principles involved in the law of mind action, which is our faith. You have to believe what you're claiming. And of course, in Get Over It, we change to fake it till you make it to faith it till you make it, because there ain't no faking it in that spiritual realm or in the realm of higher consciousness. The principle of life is involved in a law of mind action, because when we hold a thought in mind, we are giving that thought life. Love is involved because when we're holding a thought like that, we are activating the desire aspect of love, and we're also beginning to harmonize our consciousness around that thought. And of course, power or dominion's involved, because it's that power we use to master the thought we're holding in mind. Then another law is the law of expression. And this is what Charles said. I see I didn't put the citation. I apologize. We must learn the law of expression from the abstract to the concrete, from the formless to the formed. So here's a diagram for that. But first, let's look at the principles involved. So when we're using the law of expression, we're using our power of imagination. We're using our wisdom because we want to be imagining things in the proper way so we don't get bad outcomes. And wisdom is always working with understanding. So we have imagination, wisdom, and understanding. And then that diagram, so we start from this abstract idea, which we could call a principle, and then we must limit that or define it or focus it or form it or refine it, whatever word works for you. And we're doing that with our power of imagination, because it is used to shape mind substance. So we're shaping those thoughts and feelings to get an inner experience. And then from there, we get to decide whether there's an outer manifestation. And that abstract idea is formless. When we get down to a specific thought in our inner experience, that's certainly more formed. And then when we make something in the outer realm, it is definitely formed in physical substance. And so it's important when we're focusing on well-being that we're beginning with those principles and we're limiting them in some way, focusing them in some way through our power of imagination, using wisdom and understanding to a specific expression of well-being in our consciousness that then we can manifest in our bodies. And so these are fine, but what's in it for me? Well, I started a little bit talking about that as I went through the talk, but I want to add a few more quotes. So this is found in Teach Us to Pray, written by Cora and Charles. We should affirm with conviction those mighty words uttered by Jesus. All authority hath been given unto me in heaven and earth. And as traditional Christians believe, that is reserved for the man Jesus that lived over 2,000 years ago. But Charles said we should repeat his same affirmations to claim the truth that Jesus knew. And so often when we hear heaven and earth, we go to a heaven that's somewhere off someplace, and we think of planet Earth. But that's not what we're talking about. So let's do a little mini metaphysical interpretation. And this comes from the revealing word. Heaven and earth, two states of mind, the ideal and the manifestation. Heaven is the realm of pure ideas, earth of thought forms. So here again, we're talking about that realm of pure ideas that's everywhere present, or principles, and earth are our thought forms in our consciousness. So then this quote becomes, all authority hath been given unto me in the realm of pure ideas and in thought forms. Let's say that together. All authority hath been given unto me in the realm of pure ideas and in thought forms. So you see, folks, you and I have authority over principles or divine ideas, as well as our own thoughts and feelings. And we must assume and claim that for ourselves and use them consciously. And then I love this quote from Teach Us to Pray, because prayer is affirmation in unity. A prayer without desire in it, a prayer without sincerity in it, a prayer without soul or personality in it, and a prayer without spirit in it is a fruitless prayer. So when we use our affirmations, in fact, I like to call them assertions these days, because maybe affirmation isn't a powerful enough word, and that's based on this quote. The formative power of man's thought and word is governed by his faith in himself and the vehemence in which he thinks and speaks. Have you ever thought or imagined doing prayer vehemently or strongly or assertively? Because that's what they're instructing us to do. Because when we're claiming those principles, we want to do it with that sense of authority. And of course, authority is based on the principle, or one of the 12 powers, called dominion. And so we can say, I am a master of divine ideas and thought forms, because you and I, once we know what these specific principles are, we can use them at the point of our own consciousness to express more and more well-being at the point from which we're living. And of course, I gave you a whole lot of principles and laws there. And the goal is to make them so well known within us that they're almost lodged in our physical beingness. And so we can use them actively to move from a state of non-well-being or sickness to a state of well-being. And I don't ever claim healing, because healing is that process. And the goal isn't to have the process. The goal is to have well-being. So let me say this again. I am master of divine ideas and thought forms. You are master of divine ideas and thought forms. Join me in knowing that right now. Say it out loud. Assert it. Say it with vehemence. I am master of divine ideas and thought forms. Yes, isn't that the truth? And I am master of well-being. Let's say that together. I am master of well-being. And of course, when we're talking about well-being, we are bringing our soul and body into alignment with the ideal condition of those principles, which is as they are in spirit, in our divinity. And so it is. And thank you for listening.
Whoops. Pauline, oh, there you go.
I want to thank Rev Paul for a powerful message on behalf of all of us who were fortunate enough to hear this message. And living it and hearing it are certainly gaps apart, but it's a beginning. And being master of divine ideas and thought forms is incredibly powerful.
Yes.
Just that. And you were so generous in bringing to us the wisdom that you've learned over a lifetime of spiritual living. And we are filled with appreciation for that. And we thank you.
You're most welcome. And I was delighted to be, and am delighted to be invited. Thank you.
Yeah. Now we have a meditation screen up, and I was thinking it might be you that led the meditation.
Oh, I'm good with that.
If you're, we would welcome you to lead the meditation.
Yes, I'm so willing to do that. So how long would you like it to be?
It's usually, well, if Rev Lori was here, she would say, I think between 5 and 10 minutes, but this will be absolutely up to you.
Okay. All right. So everyone, let's take a deep breath. Let's take another one. And one more deep breath. As we settle into a state of an awareness of that spirit, of that divinity, each of us is at the very core of our beingness. And feel the gratitude that core always is and always will be. And that core never changes. And because it doesn't change, that divinity within us is utterly dependable. And when we call it our divinity, while that's accurate, it is even better if we can actually name those things called principles that are ever present, never changing, and always available. And so let us now remember that the principles of health, life, wholeness, substance, and intelligence are the very fundamental ones and basic ones that underlie this state we call well-being. And as you're sitting there, feel the presence of well-being at the point of view. Because the truth is, even if a part of your body isn't expressing well-being, other parts of your body, all other cells and tissues and organs are working just fine right here, right now. And as we focus on that well-being, we see that well-being being claimed and expressed through every aspect, every level of our beingness. And so let us take the affirmation, I am master of my own well-being. I am master of my own well-being, into a short period of quiet. And so I'm going to invite you to repeat after me these affirmations, assertions, and do it out loud if you're comfortable doing that. And claim these things with vehemence, strongly, assertively. I am health. Together, I am health. Feel that health right now. I am life. Together, I am life. And feel that life right now, because we use that principle or power or idea of life to manifest vitality. I am wholeness. Let's say that together. I am wholeness. Claiming that we are at some level always complete. Always. I am substance. Let's say that together. I am substance. Because we claim that principle, that idea of shape and form right now at the point of our physical bodies, and know that that principle is being manifested as well-being throughout our bodies. I am intelligence. Let's say that together. I am intelligence, because we want to use wisdom and understanding to direct the expression of our well-being with ease, grace, and power. I am the master of my own well-being. Let's say that together. I am master of my own well-being. And so you are, and so I am, and so it is. Amen.
Thank you very much to
You're
Rev
welcome.
Paul. Powerful meditation. And I love saying it all together, even though
Yes.
we know that we're not together physically, but you can just picture everybody saying it together. It just adds oomph. There is a message up here about our tithely. And if you, we have a practice of giving to the spiritual center that feeds us. And whether we're physically in that spiritual center or not, we are there spiritually and emotionally. So we invite all of you to make a contribution by clicking on that button that you see, or going to our website and clicking on the button. We now move to our prayer for protection. And I invite everybody at home, if you don't mind, to mute yourself when you say this, only because sometimes it causes a whole lot of static, but to say it out loud. Rev Paul, you don't have to unmute yourself. The light of God surrounds me. The love of God enfolds me. The power of God protects me. The presence of God watches over me. Wherever I am, God is, and all is well. Amen. And we do a yay God if we were together. Sylvie and I will be putting our hands up and saying yay God. And in the let there be peace, again, just based on our past experience, if you don't mind muting yourself, but still singing out loud in your own home, because this is a message that we need to enact in our lives. Let there be peace. And I'll mute myself.
That was meant to be, with God as creator, family are we. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now, with every step I take. Let this be my joyous vow, to take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me.
Thank you, everybody. Now it says have a great day, but we have something exciting to do. And this is, we do our fellowship, but we also, because it's Father's Day, if you have a picture of your dad, or maybe even a dad figure, or if you are a dad, you don't have a dad and you want to hold up your picture. And I don't know if we shall go, if everybody can see the screen from Larry sideways, if we do it that way. Anyway, if you hold up a picture of your dad in front of your screen, and that's my father, Basil. Was my father, Basil.
A picture of your golf picture.
And there's Janet, Scotty, Marianne,
Oh, I guess
Sophia Square.
Red violas.
They don't know how else to do it.
Yeah,
Nice.
And Nancy.
they didn't.
What a handsome young guy. Wow.
I don't know if they did us yet.
That was taken at Unity Village.
Oh, was it Beulah?
Wow.
Wow.
At the golf course, on the golf course.
Because you and Fred go way back to Unity Village, don't you?
Yeah.
Oh, there's George,
I
George
went
Ranch,
to
mom and
street
dad.
there.
Beautiful.
And this is
That's great, Nancy.
the man who,
Wow.
what's that?
I think they're doing
The
other.
man who thinks he can. That's what that poem is.
Ah,
Nice, Mary.
beautiful.
Who's Flavia Edgerton?
I don't know who that is. I wondered too.
Welcome, whoever you are. That's a great sketch of your dad.
Yeah, they're talking to him, but he's gone.
Oh, Dawn, neat.
All right.
I don't think you can see my dad, but
Hold it up, Dawn.
Hold it
I'm
up.
trying to.
There,
Really
better.
close.
That's
Him
better.
in all his medals.
Oh, wow. When you're speaking, when the person holding the picture is speaking, it's easier to see the photo.
Right.
So there, yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good, John. Yeah, we can see them. Lots of medals.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did anybody have any questions for Rev Paul or comments or?
When's that new book going to be out?
It's about, so Use the Truth You Know, the Unity's laws and rules is about half done. And it was supposed to be done by June,
Mm-hmm.
but with the COVID, I lost the deadline, so I got a little lazy.
Yeah.
We can blame a lot of things on COVID.
Yes, we can.
Good catch-all excuse.
Including being what a friend refers to, sometimes I've been a COVIDiot.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, so I'm willing to hear any comments or questions about the talk, or not. We can just talk amongst ourselves.
It was a
Everybody's
great talk,
very-
and the slides were wonderful.
Yes.
I'll be sent, so I updated the slides a little bit from the ones I sent to Larry. So Pauline, I will be sending you the PowerPoints and the PDF. So you can either ask for them from her, or she can post them somehow, or you can ask from me at alberthasselbeck@gmail.com. Albert's my legal first name, Paul's my middle name.
I kept wondering, I kept thinking maybe you took the name of Paul after the Apostle Paul
No,
for your ministry.
so when I talk about the Apostle Paul, I say the Apostle Paul was the real writer, and I'm the faux Paul.
Poor Paul.
I must admit that I'm still struggling with using God instead of God using me. A very interesting concept.
Yeah, so that's a little known fact, because it gets overridden by the tsunami of information and the tsunami of writings about how God uses us.
Yeah,
Okay,
I love
and it's very empowering. And when you use the word, so let me talk personally. When I use the word God, use God, that still activates my embedded theology, and it feels disrespectful to a God that's a being or an entity.
Yeah.
However, as soon as I know that God is really principle, using principle makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And again, you don't have to believe it. I'm just asking for you to understand. I find it very useful.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Paul.
George, you have to unmute yourself.
One comment about the slides.
Yes.
I'm colorblind, and so some of those colors blend too much.
Oh
So-
my goodness. You know, George, I usually pay attention to that because I am a little bit colorblind.
Well, yeah.
So the reddish orange background doesn't work for you. You saw that as gray, didn't you?
I'm not, well, you know, like I see the colors, it's just that they blend together though. That's the issue.
Okay.
Very difficult to discern what's actually there.
So I appreciate that feedback. I will
Okay.
need to be more careful about that.
I think that's true with a lot of stuff that goes up on the web. People don't think about that. And so a lot of stuff is missing.
Yeah, and so it's really hard as a person who does see some color, and I can't imagine what if a person can see color even better than I do, how difficult it is to plan a presentation.
Yeah.
Right? So it means you have to really avoid greens and reds, right?
Yep.
So are those the only colors to avoid? green and red if you were thinking of somebody who had that condition?
So,
Well, I think the thing is that green and red tends to be the major issue that, you know, other people have other issues, but the green and red are, and so I guess that's the thing is you get this thing that says, so click the green or the red button. You know, it's like, which is it? You know, which is which?
Yeah.
You know? So I would say, you know, have yellow and blue.
Yeah.
You know, I can see those,
Yeah.
whatever, or black and white.
Yeah, black and white.
I had a
No
question.
fail.
Yep.
I had a question or a comment about something that you had, Paul. Where you see there's but one power, and we use it as we will.
Yes.